The Spill Sports Show. Matt Reynoldson.
I've always been told I have the face for radio, and now I'm making it happen.
David Eickholt.
It's utter blasphemy. It blows my mind.
Scott Ayers.
The next time they make the playoffs, I'll be running for president.
Kick off your weekend with hard-hitting sports talk every Friday afternoon from 1 to 3 on KRNU2.
That put him in the aisle. Johnny the Jet Rogers just tore them loose from their shoes.
You believe in miracles? Yes! Unbelievable.
Comes to LeBron. He takes a fadeaway for the win. He knocked it down.
There goes Davis. Oh, my God. Davis is going to run it all the way back. Auburn's going to win the football game.
You can't believe what just happened. What a time to be alive.
Hit me with the horn, 20. Yeah! Here we go now! 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 Check it out!
Welcome in. You're listening to the Spill Sports Show on KRNU2. From Studio A in Andersen Hall on the UNL campus, we're coming at you with live sports talk for the next 2 hours. Alongside David Eickholt and Scott Ayers, I'm Matt Reynoldson. Thanks for joining us as our first show of the new year. We got a stacked lineup for you today. David, what's coming up in hour one?
All right, we'll do a bowl recap and break down some big news for the Big 12 and discuss who's likely to replace Tom Osborne and others on the playoff committee. Scott, what do we have for the second hour?
Well, boys, Nebraska ball play-by-play announcer Tommy Rizak joins us to talk about the Big Red's chances to turn this season around. And later, college basketball writer Matt Hardesty joins us with some choice words for Wisconsin high schools that are trying to ruin sports in America. Later on, we'll talk lottery and the pop culture spill, and we'll close with the final rundown.
But first, boy, does 6 and 7 sound a lot better than 5 and 8. Nebraska's the Foster Farms Bowl champions. Let's get real. It's the Foster Farms Bowl. But what does this win mean to the trajectory of the program?
Well, you know, coming into this game, everyone was picking UCLA by a large margin, and the fact that Nebraska really handled UCLA in the entire second half and late in the first half, it really says a lot about this program. They showed what they can do next season with a lot of returning players, and it shows that they can beat quality teams. They beat both Michigan State and UCLA. They were close to beating Iowa, and, you know, this Nebraska football team, they finished 6 and 7. But if a couple games had gone their way, their record would have been flip-flopped around.
Boy, it certainly looked like they figured it out.
Yeah.
You know, they ran the ball straight down UCLA's throat time and time and time again. Divino Zigbo, we may have found a running back, folks. He had a heck of a game, and I love this team having an identity. I think the coaching staff has figured it out. I want to see more of this running game, more of Tommy threw the ball 19 times. I like that low number right there, and I want to see that more. I think part of it came from the confidence of this mostly Oregon State staff going against a familiar team, but another part of it came from these Nebraska guys knowing that they're going back to the Nebraska identity.
Absolutely, and I think the biggest key of the game was they developed the running game, and it just emerged from there. I mean, you go Zigbo had 80 yards. Armstrong had, 76 yards on the ground. Amani Cross had 62. It wasn't one player either making the plays. It was a multiple running backs and just runners that just really opened up the spacing, get a good play action pass, and no receiver really stuck out. But the more you spread it around, you have an identity as a team instead of, they have a star player here. You just get the diverse attack, and I think that's very, very key going forward in the next season.
And, one of the key things is Armstrong might have only thrown the ball 19 times, but I would say that was probably his best game of the season, throwing 12 of 19 for 174 yards. And
0 picks.
0 picks. The key for this Husker team is to not turn over the football. And granted, they had one turnover. It was the Armstrong fumble on a blatant missed face mask call.
Yeah, that was really bad.
But, Nebraska just handled UCLA in the second half, and in time of possession, Nebraska had the ball for 38 minutes and 15 seconds. This has to be one of their better games all season against a quality UCLA team who got banged up on defense near the end of their season. But nonetheless, to be running for 326 yards against a Power 5 conference team, Nebraska has to be very pleased about this. Not only that, Nebraska's defense really stepped up and played when it mattered most. Even when Nate Gary went out, I think this team really revolved around that, quite frankly, bad ejection call. And
that was the worst ejection call in all of college football this year.
And it was probably Nate Gary's cleanest hit of the season, his best tackle of the season, and he was still ejected.
It was an old-fashioned football play, and a lot of ESPN analysts, the announcers, they were mind blown by it.
And
I mean, it was
Jim
just a
Moore,
football
the
play.
head coach at UCLA, even told Nate Gary that was a great hit. So, besides that, defense only gave up 386 yards. It sounds like a lot, but they were facing one of the best young up-and-coming quarterbacks at UCLA. Yeah. Only gave up 319 passing yards. It sounds like a lot. For this Nebraska defense, that's a big win.
Well, here's the thing. If you take a look at all season, what has Nebraska's defense really struggled against all year? Passing defense in terms of yardage, but not intercepting passes. They had 2 picks against them, and I think that was another huge key of the game. And hopefully they can do a lot better next season in terms of better passing defense, more big plays defense, turnovers, all that.
People are going to underrate this play because it was just so lost right after the Nate Gary play. But Josh Kalu picked off Josh Rosen the play after Nate Gary got ejected, made a statement to the rest of this defense and the rest of this team that, yeah, we're mad about Nate Gary, but we're not going to sit down in this game. We are coming with the fight. That third quarter, they were playing for Gary. They made a statement with that. Mm-hmm. They said they held UCLA to, I believe, 1 offensive yard in the third quarter.
Yep.
Dominating performance. The box score doesn't show much. It says Nebraska outscored UCLA 9-0 in the third quarter, but outgained them almost 200 yards to 1, and put them on the doorstep for another touchdown right at the beginning of the fourth quarter. It was just a dominating third quarter performance that changed the game, and that was the third quarter we were looking for all season.
That's why that in terms of people are just like, oh, we need to look at stats and all this. That's why the eye test is so important, because if you took a look at the second half of this game, Nebraska, frankly, I thought they dominated the whole second half. The game wasn't as close as the score appeared, and in terms of Gary got ejected, Kalu had that pick. They had the next man up mentality that they were not, just because their leader got ejected, they weren't just going to fall flat on their face. Next man up, each person stepped up, made big plays, and that just ultimately changed the game.
Will Nebraska stick by this identity of run first? Mike Riley was quoted as saying after the bowl game that Nebraska can be a top 3 rushing team in the Big Ten next season. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
I'll go first, and this has been the identity of Nebraska football for years, and they kind of got away from that earlier on in the season, and it didn't work out for them, such as the Wisconsin game. They were really a pass-first team in that game, and it did not work out in their favor. And so we see here, this isn't the best offensive line Nebraska's had, but they lose their starting center. Paul Thurston goes in there, and he still blocks tremendously for Zigbo, for Cross, and Newby. And next season, I think they should be especially if Armstrong is starting. Let Armstrong throw the ball 20 times a game, but really focus on that run, because it can be absolutely deadly for the Nebraska Cornhuskers.
Yeah, and I think that I think that's a good goal to have. If you can be a top 3 rushing team in the Big Ten, you're setting yourself up for success, and that's going to bring out the best in Tommy's senior year. But I think next year's here's my goals for Nebraska next season: win 9 games, get into a good bowl, win the bowl game, be a top 3 rushing defense, and be in the top at least half the Big Ten in passing defense, because I think that's a good goal to have, because just how poor we were this season. And if we can do all those things, we are setting ourselves up for future success, especially with Patrick O'Brien coming in the quarterback position after.
We'll touch on this more in this show in our spring ball preview coming up in a few weeks, but I have very, very high expectations for Nebraska next season. I think it should be win the division or bust next year. My prediction, honestly, is that Nebraska will make the playoff next year, but we're saving that for a different time. I think it should be win the division, top 3 rushing team in the Big Ten, and we'll see where Tommy can go in the second year of this offense. We'll see if the defense can trust Mike Riley and his staff after this us against the world attitude took over the program for 7 years. No, I'm not bashing Bo. Yes, I'm saying that was the player's mentality when he was there. It was a problem, probably part of the reason why Bo had to go, but that will end next year, and I think Nebraska will put it all together. Let's take a look at the national picture. Thoughts on year 2 of the playoff, and was this the worst bowl season ever?
Yes. In terms of, here's the thing, because we talked about this prior, but the bowl season shaped up before the games, looked to be amazing. There were a lot of great teams, great matchups. I found myself turning off bowl games at halftime, just not really being that interested. By far, the best bowl game, well, besides obviously the national championship, because that was a great game, was TCU and Oregon. Just because the huge comeback,
and that wasn't a game for most of it.
No, it wasn't. I mean, until Vernon Adams got hurt, then the whole scale of the game changed. But there really weren't that many games. I was like, oh my gosh, you need to turn it over like halfway through fourth quarter. This game's so close. It's gonna be a great finish. I mean, I was kind of waiting for the game to be over.
The best game was a basketball matchup. It was Duke and Indiana, and they went to overtime. You can say whatever you want about that field goal, whether it was missed, whether it went over the upright. Personally, I think it went over the upright, but that's beside the point.
Yeah,
that was a good back and forth game in the Pinstripe Bowl between a 6-6 team and a 7-5 team. Yeah, the national championship made up for a little bit of it, but the playoff was awful.
Yep.
The New Year's Six bowl games were awful. The most interesting game was a 14-point win by Houston.
And I was about to say, there were some interesting bowl games that really no one pays attention to. They were all the bowl games that were in the middle of December, games that, don't get the attention of a lot of people. I mean, Memphis got blown out by Auburn. A lot of people were saying that would be a great game. I mean, you scroll down and look at some of these games. Central Michigan lost to a 5-7 Minnesota. And, one funny thing is all 3 5-7 teams won their bowl games. San Jose State, Minnesota, and your lovely Nebraska Cornhuskers. But, Virginia Tech, they won in Beamer's final game. That was cool.
Best way to go out.
That was one of the cool. But, you look at all these New Year's Six bowls, and, David, I had to say, the Iowa Hawkeyes, they were playing a man on a mission. That was Christian McCaffrey. Wanted to prove the Heisman committee wrong. And quite frankly, I think they were, because he tore apart the Iowa Hawkeyes.
Here's the thing. The Iowa defense was a pretty good defense all year. And if they had all that focus on McCaffrey and still couldn't stop him, that just single-handedly proves McCaffrey was the best player in the country.
And Iowa was a better statistical run defense than Stanford had played all season. Northwestern was good, but Iowa honestly was a better statistical run defense than Stanford had played all season.
But, it's one of those games, though, that, I could be mad we didn't show up. But at the end of the day, Stanford was a really good football team. Christian McCaffrey, I think, still deserved the Heisman. And Stanford setting themselves up. But, 12-2 is not too shabby. So I can live with it.
For those of you paying attention to that "we" right in there, David Eickholt is our quote-unquote Hawkeye apologist.
Yes.
He loves that tag.
And, you look at these other games. Ohio State pretty much, I don't want to say dominated Notre Dame, but they dominated Notre Dame.
Did you?
Ole Miss.
Personally, I expected Ohio State to dominate Notre Dame. I didn't think Notre Dame stood that big of a chance.
At the end of the day, I thought Ohio State was still the best team in the Big Ten. They lost to Michigan State, but I think overall they would have stood a better chance against Alabama. But you look at
100%.
these other games. Ole Miss blows out Oklahoma State. Northwestern blown out by Tennessee. And, the offense that just keeps on chugging along in Florida scores a measly 7 points against Michigan. Just a lot of these games were not impressive to watch. They weren't fun to watch. And quite frankly, I'd rather be playing NCAA Football 14 EA Sports than watch some of these bowl games.
Quick side note, they're talking about re-releasing NCAA football in 17. They're now in contract negotiations for that, so be on the lookout for that.
Well, let's talk about that playoff for a minute. Do you think it was a good idea? Obviously, the ratings were a disaster, but that might have been because of the bad games in general.
Time, yeah.
First question, do you think it was a bad idea to have it on New Year's Eve? Second question, do you think it should have been the opposite matchups, Clemson, Michigan State, and Oklahoma, Alabama?
I'll tell you what, I think they got the matchups right, but here's what I want to say. I think now because of this year, it confirms that the 4-team playoff is enough because, honestly, Clemson and Alabama were on a completely different level than any other team in college football, I think. And I think the playoff proved that. Because, personally, I picked Oklahoma to win the whole thing. And then, Clemson's second half, Deshaun Watson was unbelievable in that championship game, too.
And we saw a bad matchup, though, last year as well between Oklahoma and Clemson. And Oklahoma proved this year that they still haven't gotten over that hump. They still haven't they still haven't gotten over the hump of being able to beat a team that matches up with them speed and scheme-wise as Clemson does. I feel like they would have maybe had a better chance against Alabama than obviously against a team like Michigan State, because it seems like in the past Bob Stoops has had Saban's number when Saban's same as former assistants, Mark D'Antonio, have just been blown out by Saban every single time.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, I think Alabama and Clemson were still the two best teams in the country.
Absolutely.
Even if you switched up the matchups, I think Oklahoma probably would have made the Bama-Oklahoma game closer than what Michigan State did.
That was awful.
But, I mean, Deshaun Watson, I didn't give him nearly enough credit as he deserved. He was a phenomenal player. He set the record for most passing yards in a championship game, even in a loss. He played great football throughout the season, and
kind of still flew under the
Alabama,
radar despite being the only undefeated team.
I agree. He flew under the radar, but Alabama, I don't know how they lost to Ole Miss, but they just proved once again that they're the dominant team in college football.
Well, after the break, the Big 12 got a big break from the NCAA that could set the conference up for a near automatic playoff berth in the future. We'll discuss it and more coming up. This is the Spill Sports Show.
Bring 'em out, bring 'em out, bring 'em out, bring 'em out. It's hard to yell when the barrel's in your mouth. Come on.
You're listening to the Spill Sports Show on KRNU2.
Just gotta do what I gotta do, and when I gotta do it, So basically, just doing what I gotta do every time I step on the court and do what I gotta do.
Now, live from Andersen Hall on the UNL campus, here's Matt Reynoldson, David Eickholt, and Scott Ayers.
Welcome back in. You're listening to the Spill Sports Show on KRNU2. This week, the NCAA changed the rule to allow the Big 12 to hold a championship game with only 10 teams in the conference. But here's the real question. Should the Big 12 even want a championship game?
Yeah, I think they absolutely do, because you got to think about they still had a huge debate whether Oklahoma was even deserving of the playoff spot. And it's just one of those arguments that if you don't have a conference championship, quote unquote, I believe in the actual contract of the playoff, it says you need to be undisputably one of the top 4 teams in the country. And if you don't have a championship game in your conference, I don't know exactly. It's a lot harder to prove it. So I think it'll be nothing but benefits for the Big 12 that have a championship.
Yeah, I always love seeing a championship game because it shows the difference between contenders and pretenders. But there's one thing I was looking at, the Big 12 in their bowl games, 1-5.
Yeah.
And, Baylor being the only team who won against a North Carolina team who wasn't all that impressive. So even if the Big 12 has a conference championship game, they still have a lot to prove to college football because their so-called high-powered offenses weren't enough in the bowl season against other conference teams. It just wasn't all that impressive. I guess TCU also won, so 2-5, still a very unimpressive record. I like the idea of a conference championship game, but the Big 12 just has to get a little bit better.
I do want to give a big shout to Baylor, though, because they were decimated by injuries, and the fact they came out and still won in that fashion was just extremely impressive.
636 rushing yards.
With 3 of their top quarterbacks out.
636 is unbelievable.
Yeah. It set a bowl game record down there in the Belk Bowl, I believe.
It was the Russell Athletic
Bowl. Well, I think the Big 12 doesn't necessarily want a championship game, but I think they've found that they have to have one.
Yep.
It would have been a rematch this year between Oklahoma State and Oklahoma. Keep that in mind. Which Oklahoma blew out Okie State on the road. I think Oklahoma proved they were by far the best team in the Big 12 this year. It's just tough to lobby your conference when you don't have a conference championship game.
That's why Notre Dame's always going to be on the outside looking in terms of playoff, despite, not having a championship and being.
Oh, I don't know. I think Notre Dame will always get the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, and that's. I was talking to a couple Notre Dame people, and they were like, "Oh yeah, we deserve a better chance." Blah blah blah. I said, "Well, then join a conference." And they say, "No, we refuse to join a conference. That's crap." I'm like, well, you know what? You're gonna have to make up your mind.
They're gonna be 8-4, 9-3 most years, I think, if they join conference.
Yeah, I just get Notre Dame out of here. Let them join the ACC and really try to battle.
Yeah. Well, let's look at the conference championships as they were this season. Clemson was number 1, North Carolina was number 10, Iowa was 4, and Michigan State was 5 going into conference championship week. Which brings into the question: are conference championships already kind of the de facto 8-team playoff that everybody seems to be scrambling for?
It's one of those things where they technically could be seen as playoff games because that's how big these implications have. Granted, Mountain West Conference teams are rarely going to have conferences such as the Mountain West are rarely going to have teams who are up in that top 10. So really, these Power 5 conferences are packing in 2 or 3 teams in their respective conferences in the top 10. So technically they could be seen as playoff games, but that probably won't be seen as good enough to the public view. They really are pushing for that 8-team playoff, I should say.
Looking at an article by Lack and Littman on usatoday.com, they have a college site called For the Win. The title of the article is an 8-team playoff in 2015 would have made for the best month in college football history. But think about it. We might have seen a rematch between Michigan State and Iowa. Ohio State and Notre Dame, yeah, they might have deserved consideration for a playoff. But the thing is, an 8-team playoff may devalue the regular season, which could be detrimental to what college football, Division I college football, has always stood for.
Yeah, and I agree. I think 4 teams is what we need to keep it at until there are multiple other teams that prove they can play at a championship level.
Yep.
Because Michigan State ended up being a fraud. Connor Cook had a terrible last 2 games. Played terrible against Iowa, played terrible, obviously, in the game against Alabama. But 8 teams, why? I mean, they might have some really good games, but if a really good game's one round, they're just going to get blown out the next round. Because, again, the only 2 teams that actually deserve to be in the championship this year was Alabama and Clemson. Stanford could have made an argument, but they lost 2 games in the regular season.
In all honesty, I'm thinking 64-game tournament. We get those Nebraska Cornhuskers in there. Next thing you know, Tommy Armstrong is hoisting up
the national
championship trophy. That's just my idea, though, guys. I don't know.
Well, you think about it with an 8-team playoff. Houston wouldn't even have been in that, and they were definitely one of the best teams, the best 8 teams in the country. Can you argue that? I don't think anybody can argue that. Because they beat Florida State. They beat everybody on their schedule except for a trap game at UConn, which still blows my mind. But I think people will continue to argue the same way about the 8-team playoff until, Scotty, I know you're exaggerating, but until there's 64 teams, and let's just give everybody the trophy.
That's just everyone in the Power 5 conference getting in the automatic playoff. It's like, why? I mean,
exactly. Why even have a season? No, yeah. But for real, let's just give everybody a trophy. Hey, it's America.
It's like a 5th league rec league. It's like a 5th grade recreation league. Congratulations, you tried. Here's your participation award. Nobody wants that.
Have you seen that commercial where I think it might be a Kia commercial, but his son, the dad gets the trophy from his son and looks at it, and it says participation, and you can hear his thoughts, and he says participation. But we won every game. And so he takes off the placard that says participation and writes champs in Sharpie on there. Well, I mean, it seems like that's where this country is headed with sports. We'll talk about that a little later when Matt Hardesty joins us in the second hour for some choice words for the Wisconsin High School Athletic Association. But going back to college football, there's going to be a new playoff committee next year. There are some people on the playoff committee are on 2-year rotations, and Jeff Long, the Arkansas athletic director, will be stepping down from committee chair, and it was announced yesterday that Texas Tech Athletic Director Kirby Hocutt has been named the new playoff committee chair. Tom Osborne, Mike Gold, Mike Tranghese, and Pat Hayden are out next year. They're the 4 that had the 2-year contract with the playoff, and so they will be replaced next year. They haven't decided who will replace them next year. ESPN wrote an article that listed people like Bobby Bowden, Roger Staubach, Terry Donahue, Jack Harbaugh, and Steve Spurrier as possible people that could work on the playoff committee. Which of those names sticks out to you?
Well, the first name that always sticks out to me is Steve Spurrier. Such a great and legendary coach. Is he going to stay out of retirement? That's what I don't know. But in all honesty, whoever it is in this committee, they just need to make the right decision and putting in the right teams. I know the first year of this playoff committee, there was a lot of controversy if Ohio State deserved to be in. Obviously, Ohio State proved people wrong, but, there's always that air that's a possibility with putting in these new members because, they're going to have their own personal opinions and biases.
Well, and ESPN discussed Steve Spurrier. They usually want their playoff committee members, the playoff committee wants their members, as Bill Hancock, the head of the CFP executive director, made this clear when they started it. They want their CFP playoff committee members to be kind of low-key. And Steve Spurrier, as we all know, is the exact opposite of low-key.
Yeah.
Would he be a good fit? Would he work well, do you think, with the rest of the committee to stay under the radar as much as possible while picking the 4 teams to compete for a national championship?
Steve Spurrier, or as I like to call him, he's the king of sound bites. I think he would be. I think he'd be a loudmouth. I think it'd be pretty detrimental to the playoff committee. But I'm really upset. I would have loved to see Frank Beamer. I'd love to see Frank Beamer in the playoff committee.
I think they need to be. I think they touched on that, like recently retired coaches. They mentioned that they might need to be at least 5 years, I think, removed from college football.
I
from
do
coaching.
like Bobby Bowden, though. I think Bobby Bowden would be a great addition. But one thing that's interesting, though, because now that the head of the committee now is a Big 12 school, I'm interested to see will they really have a championship next year, because now they have he's the committee chair. He could easily just sit in there and make a case for the Big 12 to get a Big 12 team in the playoff, because obviously it does nothing but benefit his conference. So they might move to a championship right away, but now I could see why they maybe wouldn't.
And just to bounce off of that, even if they do talk about putting a Big 12 team, I think I'm going to go back to what I was saying earlier about those bowl games. 2-5 was pathetic from showing from the Big 12. Pac-12 also did not show up. USC, UCLA, both lost to Wisconsin, Nebraska, 2 teams who didn't have good seasons in the Big 10. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see, if he makes a case, but people should really make sure that these Big 12 teams are really worthy of being a playoff teams. And I don't know, maybe schedule early season games against out-of-conference teams because, Oklahoma didn't even look good against Clemson. It was not pretty.
First half, though, obviously.
And, TCU, they got lucky Vernon Adams was hurt, or else they were going to be in a world of hurt. So I don't know. There's a lot of things to say about this Big 12 conference. It's a little distasteful. I don't know. That's just my opinion on it.
Well, we were talking about Heisman winner Steve Spurrier as part of the playoff committee. And another Heisman winner on there that we mentioned was Roger Staubach. He won the Heisman for the Naval Academy in 1963. He won a Super Bowl MVP for the Dallas Cowboys. And according to ESPN, here's what he had to say about taking the job. He said, "They talked to me a couple years ago about it. The good news is they expect a lot of time. I would have really enjoyed it, except I can't really give the time to it right now. But I'm still in the category right now of commitments to a lot of things. They really do a lot of work. I think it would be interesting and fun to do. We would have had Navy in the Final Four this year, but other than that, I would have been pretty objective about it." Obviously, Roger making a joke there. But what would you think about, I think he's an intelligent guy. He knows football, and he's also committed to a lot of things as far as being involved with other athletic departments. What do you think about Roger Staubach?
I think Roger Staubach could be an excellent addition. I think what the committee should be doing is past Heisman winners and past retired coaches who have been proven to be good people on the field and off the field, and they have a very, very vast knowledge. I think Roger Staubach's one of the, he's a poster child for that. I think he'd be a great addition. I think athletic directors, I'm not a big fan of having athletic directors or other people who aren't really involved in sports, but I think he should be a criteria. I think he fits every category or every question you'd want to answer. I think he'd be the best fit for him.
No, I completely agree. And kind of going off what you said, Roger Staubach and other past Heisman winners could be great for this playoff committee. And, obviously they might show a little bias to their old teams, but as long as they're not deeply enrooted or involved in their program, they deserve a chance at being part of the college football playoff committee.
Well, from college to the NFL, we'll talk next about the playoffs as well as the coaching carousel. All that and more coming up after the break. This is the Spill Sports Show.
The Spill Sports Show. Matt Reynoldson.
I've always been told I have the face for radio, and now I'm making it happen.
David Eickholt.
It's utter blasphemy. It blows my mind.
Scott Ayers.
The next time they make the playoffs, I'll be running for president.
Kick off your weekend with hard-hitting sports talk every Friday afternoon from 1 to 3 on KRNU2.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Spill Sports Show on KRNU2. Around and around and around we go. It's the fun ride that comes once a year, the NFL coaching carousel. To recap, as of yesterday, new hires include the New York Giants hiring their own offensive coordinator, Ben McAdoo, Philadelphia Eagles hiring, not official obviously yet because the Chiefs are still in the playoffs, but hiring Chiefs offensive coordinator Doug Peterson, San Francisco 49ers hiring Eagles head coach Chip Kelly, the Cleveland Browns hiring Bengals offensive coordinator Hugh Jackson, the Miami Dolphins hiring Bears offensive coordinator Adam Gase, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers hiring their own offensive coordinator Dirk Cutter, and the Tennessee Titans are still looking. Guys, which one of these sticks out to you?
Honestly, Adam Gase, I think, is a phenomenal hire by the Miami Dolphins. This is an offensive mastermind. This is a guy who even Peyton Manning says is a football genius on the offensive side of the football. And you know what? The Miami Dolphins struggled with both offense and defense, and they got a guy who knows his stuff. This is when he was an offensive coordinator with the Denver Broncos, they set several records. This was the season when Peyton Manning set the record for best offense maybe in the history. And now he's getting his chance to be a head coach at the age of 37. This is a very talented head coach, and I would be shocked if he doesn't do well in Miami.
Well, I think their problems might stem from Ryan Tannehill. That's my own personal bias. I think I think it's a great hire for them, absolutely. Miami just needs a spark, and Campbell got him that big win over the Patriots in the final game of the regular season, but Miami needs something to get them out of this middling mode. I really hope Adam Gase brings in a new defensive coordinator, a guy that really can bring this defensive line to be as good as they are talented.
Yeah, they just need to play together. I think there's only two hires that actually stick out to me. One is obviously what you both touched on, Adam Gase. I think that's going to be a really good hire because I think the Dolphins have some decent talent on that team. I think Tannehill has potential to be a decent quarterback. I really do. I think he's not bad. The other, obviously, is Chip Kelly, the 49ers, but that's either going to be a great hire or it's going to be a complete and utter failure. I know Chip Kelly is talking about obviously trying to reignite Colin Kaepernick's career, and they're also talking about obtaining RG3, which I think is a great fit if RG3 ever wants to get his career back off the ground. And under Chip Kelly's system, they have, I don't know. The 49ers, they're bad, but I still think they have some decent talent on that roster. I don't think they're as bad as their record actually shows, but I don't like the Giants hire. I don't like the Browns hire. I don't like the Buccaneers hire. Browns, I don't care who they hire. It's pretty much over. They're the Cleveland Browns, the epitome of fail.
We'll talk about the Browns hire a little bit later, but do you think the Tennessee Titans should have gone a little harder after Chip Kelly, or did they just not want a personality like that to mix with their front office? Because he would have been a pretty obvious look in Tennessee because his former starting quarterback at Oregon, Marcus Mariota, is the starting quarterback for the Tennessee Titans. What do you guys think about that?
And, he had that chemistry with Marcus Mariota, but I think the Tennessee Titans were looking at, how did Chip Kelly perform in his last season or in his last 2 seasons? And quite frankly, it wasn't all that impressive. He got rid of some key players, some key faces, and it really turned out to bite him in the butt. I still like the idea of San Francisco going after him. It's kind of a bold move, but I think it was smart for Tennessee not to hire Chip Kelly.
You know why I think they didn't end up really pursuing him? Is because I don't think Marcus Mariota really wanted it. Because I think Mariota understands that Chip Kelly is a college coach and he has a college system. Mariota wants to be a talented pro quarterback. Chip Kelly is not. He knows that Chip Kelly is not the leader that he needs to be the best quarterback he can be. And I think they did ask Mariota, "Hey, do you want to be under Chip Kelly? Do you want us to pursue him again?" And I don't think Mariota supported him.
Do you think Marcus Mariota cares about being an NFL quarterback more or winning games more? Because that's the key question here that we're talking about.
But can Chip Kelly really win games? I don't think he's proven to really win games in the NFL, especially under his system.
What was he, 26-21 in Philly?
Okay.
No, I know. No, I'm not saying.
That's not winning games, though. That's
that's
middling
what I mean.
the road.
And Chip Kelly has not proven himself as an NFL coach yet that he can be a true playoff threat. As a head coach. He was a phenomenal college coach, great West Coast system, runs the hurry up like nobody's business, but it's a whole different world in the NFL, and Chip Kelly's just adjusting to that right now. I still think he can be successful with Cap or RG3, as you said. San Francisco might be looking at him, but you know what? He just did not do well in Philadelphia.
If Chip Kelly is not successful in the 49ers, his pro career is done. I don't think anyone will ever hire him again. I still think Chip Kelly could go back to college and be successful, but what he doesn't understand is Chip Kelly has a great system in college, but the NFL is the best athletes in the world, some of the best athletes in the world. That system will not work against defenses that are NFL caliber.
Who's the worst hire out of this list I've showed you right here?
Honestly, it's the Cleveland Browns just because they're the Cleveland. I mean, it's just the Cleveland Browns. I don't really care who they hire.
And, Hugh Jackson, I think, is actually a fairly good hire. He was a good offensive coordinator out in Cincinnati. And, this is a Cincinnati Bengals team who, quite frankly, made a few too many mistakes in that game against Pittsburgh. Right now, Cincinnati could be in the second round of the playoffs, but instead they're going to be watching from home. But Hugh Jackson did a great job in Cincinnati. I kind of look at the New York Giants. Ben McAdoo, they stay in their system rather than going out looking for a different prospect, I should say. I don't know too much about McAdoo, however you pronounce his name, but what I do know is I feel like the Giants should have gone out and looked harder rather than just staying in their system and hiring their own offensive coordinator.
Nebraska offensive coordinator Danny Langsdorf did work under Ben McAdoo as the quarterback's coach for the Giants last year. But I'm gonna contradict you a little bit here, David. I think the best hire was the Cleveland Browns getting Hugh Jackson because he's proven himself as a head coach. I don't think he should have been let go the last time, but Hugh Jackson knows football. He's worked his way back instead of, doing what some guys do when they get fired, go to a coordinator job and get stuck there and not really be that motivated. The Browns, I think, got a winner hire, and I think he's definitely going to be there for more than 2 years.
And I think one thing for the Cleveland Browns, too, Hugh Jackson even said, get rid of Johnny Football. He has been an absolute head case for the Cleveland Browns in that program. He's got such phenomenal talent, but he's wasted and thrown it away. If Manziel wants to revitalize his career, he needs to get out of there. It'll just be the better part for both Cleveland and Manziel because at the end of his time in Cleveland, it's been a bit of a train wreck.
Yeah, I was exactly bringing that up. I will give him some credit because the first thing he did say was, we need Johnny Manziel out of here. Johnny Manziel, I think he's going to end up going to the Dallas Cowboys. But I'll tell you what, on a serious note, Johnny Manziel needs to get some help. Like, if you are an NFL, you want to be an NFL quarterback, but you are wearing a wig and a fake mustache and going by a different name going to Vegas to go party, you have a legitimate problem.
I love Billy Manziel though.
So
that's just my favorite story of the year.
He needs to get some rehab and really get some help though. I mean, that's a very serious thing. Okay. But I'll tell you what, I don't know. Until the Cleveland Browns actually prove to me that they have some sort of sustainability and they have some sort of, they can keep their talented players out of trouble. Josh Gordon, for example. I don't care who they hire. They are literally the Philadelphia 76ers of the NFL.
Well, what everybody's been talking about this week, so we're switching gears a little bit here. What everybody's been talking about this week is the relocation of NFL teams. Which team do you think is a better fit for LA? The Rams, the Chargers, or the Raiders?
And, I think the Rams and the Raiders have a better chance of surviving in LA because they've had those fan bases back in the day. There used to be an LA Rams before they moved to St. Louis. I think the Chargers going to LA is a terrible idea. The city of LA cheers against the Chargers. They're Raiders fans. Now they're Rams fans. I don't like the idea of the Chargers moving to LA, especially they're going to play second fiddle to the Rams. I just don't think the Chargers are going to survive very long in LA. I really don't. I think the Rams have a chance, but they have to play quality football. They can't be a middle-of-the-pack team because, the LA fans, even when the Lakers are doing well, they don't sell out their crowds. So they really have to be a good football team in order to draw on good fan bases.
Well, here's the thing about LA, and this I'll relate to the Lakers. LA fans demand success in order for them to pay attention to you because otherwise there's so much other entertainment they can get in LA because LA obviously one of the big spots in all of America. But the LA Rams are definitely the best fit because of the past team. Yeah. They still have fans that are some ended up becoming Rams fans and some just kind of fell off the bandwagon. But now the fact that the original team is back in LA, I think that's it's the best fit. Because Chargers, like you said, I think that's a terrible fit. The Raiders, I think that's a terrible fit. And honestly, I think LA only needs one NFL team. I think two would be a very, 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 very big stretch.
Because both teams would have to play in Inglewood.
Yeah.
In that brand new stadium. One thing I want to say about St. Louis, Rams owner Stan Kroenke said a few years back that he would never let this team leave St. Louis. And then he comes out this week really just begging the other owners of the league to vote him to go to LA, where he's got dollar signs in his eyes. And he said he justified it by saying that the Rams couldn't keep up with 3 sports teams. I think the Cardinals have a huge following, the Blues have a huge following, and I think this is a really poor decision to move the Rams out of St. Louis. I think they're the best fit for LA.
I agree.
But I think they're the fan base that least deserved to leave their home city.
Can we all agree that LA deserves an NFL team, though?
I mean, I guess, but
I don't think they deserve an NFL team necessarily, but I believe you can't have have professional sports without having a pro sports team in the second biggest market.
And I just want to say this real quick. I think it's a terrible decision for the Rams to move from St. Louis. I mean, if you have ever watched a Cardinals baseball game, they sell out almost every single game. The fan base is tremendous in St. Louis. To move away from that is ridiculous. You see people, when St. Louis was moving out, St. Louis fans were hanging their jerseys up on the fence outside of the St. Louis practice facility, and a lot of St. Louis fans are done with the Rams. The Colts are looking for the support now from those former Rams fans in St. Louis, so I don't like the idea for moving it.
You know why, though? It's just because the St. Louis Cardinals demand winning. And the St. Louis Cardinals are obviously been very, very successful, and that's why they sell out. The Rams haven't really sold out that well because they're mediocre to average, and that's why.
I think every team in the history of ever has had more stadium attendance than the LA Rams in their last year they were there, though. So I think that's the main reason they moved to St. Louis, and we'll see if they have a better turnout when they go back to LA now. Coming up next, our predictions for the divisional round of the playoffs and beyond. Stay with us. This is the Spill Sports Show.
Woo! Bring 'em out, bring 'em out, bring 'em out, bring 'em out. It's hard to yell when the barrel's in your mouth. Come on.
You're listening to the Spill Sports Show on KRNU2.
Just gotta do what I gotta do, and when I gotta do it, you know. So basically, just doing what I gotta do every time I step on the court and do what I gotta do.
Now, live from Andersen Hall on the UNL campus, here's Matt Reynoldson, David Eickholt, and Scott Ayers.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Spill Sports Show on KRNU2. It's looking like a divisional round for the ages this weekend in the NFL. Guys, I know you can't help but be excited. We got the game of the week, the Seattle Seahawks at the Carolina Panthers. We got the Green Bay Packers at the Arizona Cardinals. An upset alert in New England when the Kansas City Chiefs visit the New England Patriots. And the Pittsburgh Steelers at the Denver Broncos. Which matchup stands out to you?
And you know what? Being a boy from Denver, Pittsburgh, Denver, that matchup stands out to me. Last time Pittsburgh made a little trip to Denver, Colorado for the playoffs, I think we all know what happened. Tebow time! And my boy Timmy Tebow, 316 passing yards. Yeah, he had a game-winning touchdown to Demaryius Thomas, and quite frankly, you know what? Tim Tebow might not be there, but we have the sheriff in town, and Peyton Manning. And quite frankly, Peyton Manning, if he wins a Super Bowl, I'll direct it 30 for 30 on it. And I think the Broncos are going to get revenge against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Big Ben might be out. My boy Antonio Brown, bye-bye, he's gone. And you know what? I think the Pittsburgh Steelers are on their third or fourth string running back. I think I'm going to get a call later this week to run for them. I just don't think this Pittsburgh Steelers team is going to be healthy enough to even have a chance against the Denver Broncos.
You know, David, I'm really sorry your Iowa Hawkeyes aren't in these divisional playoffs. Okay. But you know who is? Both of my teams, my Arizona Cardinals, my Kansas City Chiefs. Sorry, Romeo Crennel, you weren't the guy. But Andy Reid is. And you know what? Alex Smith can get it done. You know what? Lost Jamal Charles? So what? We got Niall Davis returning kicks. We got Sharkandrick West, who the best name in football. You know, he's been great. The Kansas City Chiefs shut up all the haters last week when they blew out the Texans in Houston. And, you know, this Arizona team, they were number one in the power rankings a couple weeks ago. You know, they might have gotten blown out against Seattle in a game that did not matter. But Carson Palmer was in the MVP race all season. David Johnson running through brick walls out there. You know, I'm really hoping for this Super Bowl matchup, and I think it's going to happen.
Now I'm going to turn my attention to the Carolina Panthers and the Seattle Seahawks. Luckily, Blair Walsh is not on the Carolina Panthers roster, so I'm feeling really, really good about the kicking game. And Cam Newton's going to come out with a vengeance and just throw bullets all over Richard Sherman, because Richard Sherman will still be thanking God for the victory over the Minnesota Vikings and Blair Walsh's legendary kick. But I'll tell you what, Cam Newton's going to make another case, you know, MVP, best quarterback of all time. Well, who knows? So Carolina
best
Panthers
quarterback
going all the
of
way.
all time.
I will
Tom
say
Brady is garbage compared to Cam Newton. Are you kidding me? Look at the resumes.
I will say this. If Seattle can beat Carolina, I don't think Arizona or Green Bay will beat the Seahawks. What Seattle was able to do against Arizona in Arizona, it might have been seen as a meaningless game, but Seattle absolutely dominated the Cardinals. I think Carolina's really going to have to play well, and Seahawks, when they lost to Carolina in the regular season, they struggled to cover Greg Olsen. I wouldn't be surprised if Greg Olsen has another big game in the playoffs. What is it, Saturday or Sunday when the Seahawks and Cardinals?
Sunday.
Okay, yeah, when Sunday comes, that's going to be a very fun game to watch.
You know, Arizona went up to Seattle this season. We're looking ahead a little bit here, but Arizona went up to Seattle this season and shut up that 12th man real fast. They beat the Seahawks up there. This Seahawks team is beatable. You know, the Minnesota Vikings, except for Blair Walsh and the holder, I blame the holder on that one. We'll get back to that maybe. But the Minnesota Vikings prove that these Seattle Seahawks are beatable. Can they go in to the house of the most talented team in the National Football League and pull this off?
I'm not entirely convinced. I don't think they can.
The Seahawks?
No.
You know what? I'm going to say it's very well possible. Russell Wilson in the last half of the season was one of the best quarterbacks, if not the best quarterback in the National Football League. People call him a game manager. His stats were better than Cam Newton. He was a tremendous quarterback in the second half of the season. Marshawn Lynch, beast mode, is back. This run game is going to be revitalized. This is going to be a very fun football game to watch. I think Seattle can get it done, but I think Carolina will win.
Yeah, I think Carolina's going to win. And honestly, beast mode, bad mode. He was not that good this season. When he was playing, he wasn't. Thomas Rawls was better than him this season.
He was hurt.
Thomas
for most
Rawls
of the
is
season.
more of a loss than Marshawn Lynch this season.
I think the postseason's a different animal, and if Marshawn Lynch is 100% healthy, I'd take him still over a lot of running backs. I mean, we're going to see what happens. This Carolina team is also very beatable. There were a lot of close games they were in late in the football season. It's going to be a very fun game to watch, and this Seattle defense is still the real deal.
Well, if you want to talk about finishing games, think of how many games that Seattle led in the fourth quarter and then choked away. I mean, the difference between the Panthers and the Seahawks.
That was early on in the season.
Yeah, well, I mean, the difference between the Panthers and Seahawks is Panthers can finish football games. The Seahawks have not proven to play a full 60 minutes and finish.
Well, let's take the choo-choo train right up the East Coast to New England. Can Tom Bahali and Justin Houston put enough pressure on Tom Brady and this Patriots offense to put the Chiefs' corners in a good enough position? Because Tom Brady's going to get his yards, but can they bend and not break?
See, that will be a very interesting... And, Tom Brady was shaken up in that final game against Miami Dolphins. Clearly, he's had time to heal and recover. I don't know. This is one of those offense versus defense matchups. New England's going to be about as healthy as they've been in a while, but still have some injuries on that offensive line. But one thing that's going to be huge is Rob Gronkowski.
Yep.
He is an absolute animal, and if Kansas City can't stop him, they're going to have issues stopping New England as a whole.
It's the battle of the tight ends, Travis Kelce and Rob Gronkowski. It should be a really interesting game. I want to see if the Chiefs can get their run game going. I want to see if the Chiefs can sustain possessions. I think this game could come down to a special teams play. And Niall Davis is still on the roster. That kick return, the first ever kick return to open a game in the NFL playoffs, he did it against Houston last week, started the romp. What about the one we haven't talked about yet very much? Green Bay. Can that team, after last week's performance in Washington, go in to Arizona and beat the team that blew them out a couple weeks ago?
Honestly, never count out Aaron Rodgers. That is one thing you cannot do. Granted, you know what? Green Bay hasn't been great late down the stretch. But finally, the discount double check of Aaron Rodgers was back against the Washington Redskins. Redskins defense, not nearly as talented as Arizona. However, it's impossible to take out the Green Bay Packers out of the equation. I think it's going to be a lot closer than what a lot of people are saying. Carson Palmer in Arizona, he's having a phenomenal year. But I'm going with the upset. I'm picking the Green Bay Packers.
All right. In the flavor of upsets, let's pick which teams are going to be in our NFC and AFC championships. Scotty, we'll start with you.
You know what? I touched on it earlier. Tim Tebow might not be playing, but I know Peyton Manning is, and the Denver Broncos will be beating the Pittsburgh Steelers in a score of 38-14. And they will be meeting the New England Patriots. It's destiny. It is absolute destiny for Peyton Manning and his 30-for-30 film to beat Tom Brady in the AFC Championship playoffs. And on the other side, you know what? The Seahawks are going to be dabbing on Cam Newton's grave. It's going to be Seattle versus Green Bay, an NFC Championship rematch. Wow, I am excited, boys.
David, let's go with you.
Tell you what, Scotty, I really, really want to be interviewing that 30-for-30 special because it's going to be Peyton Manning and Tom Brady, the final showdown, and Manning's going to take it away. And I'll tell you what, Cam Newton will be giving away a lot of footballs to a lot of kids in the game, and he will be dabbing while doing so because Cam Newton is about to win.
What if I told you that a kid in Lincoln, Nebraska, with no connection to Peyton Manning, made a 30 for 30 documentary? The one that got away Thursday on ESPN. All right, other playoff picks, David. Keep it going.
I'll tell you what. I'm also going to choose the. I gotta give the Cardinals. I believe in the Cardinals. The bad man Aaron Rodgers has been bad in too many games this season. So, nope, it's gonna be the Cardinals.
So you got the Cardinals, you got the Panthers, you got the Patriots,
and
the Broncos.
The Manning, Brady, the final showdown. Who really deserves to be in the Hall of Fame first?
Classic pick by David. He's going all chalk. I am not going chalk. I got the Panthers. I got my Cardinals. The Chiefs are going into Foxborough for the upset, and then they're going to take out the Broncos. Chiefs and Cardinals Super Bowl. Let's go.
Nah, see, here's the thing. We need the Manning-Brady showdown to happen because we need this 30 for 30 to happen.
Yeah.
Directed by Scott Ayers.
And you know what's going to happen in that championship game? Richard Sherman, Peyton Manning, one final battle. And you know who's going to have a game-winning rushing touchdown?
Peyton Manning.
Peyton Manning, 60 yards.
60-yard rushing touchdown for the old man. All right, stay tuned, folks. Nebraska ball play-by-play announcer Tommy Rezach joins us next. Hour 2 of the Spill Sports Show coming your way.
The Spill Sports Show. Matt Reynoldson.
I've always been told I have the face for radio, and now I'm making it happen.
David Eickholt.
It's utter blasphemy. It blows my mind.
Scott Ayers.
The next time they make the playoffs, I'll be running for president.
Kick off your weekend with hard-hitting sports talk every Friday afternoon from 1 to 3 on KRNU2.
Child did that. Put him in the aisle. Johnny the Jet Rogers just tore them loose from their shoes.
You believe in miracles? Yes!
Comes to LeBron. He takes a fadeaway for the win. Hey! Knocked it down!
Here goes Davis. Oh, my God! Davis is going to run it all the way back. Auburn's going to win the football game.
You can't believe what just happened! What a time to be alive!
Hit me with the horn, 20. Keep making noise! Yeah! Here we go now! 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 Check it out!
Welcome back to the second hour of the Spill Sports Show. Tommy Rezach is the play-by-play announcer for Nebraska basketball on KRNU, and he joins us now. Tommy, welcome in.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So, this team, coming off 2 big wins, the largest road win since 1920, winning at Rutgers by 34 points, and then dismantling Minnesota here at home. We're up by 38 points with around 9 minutes left in the game, and they ended up winning by 25. Has this team found something with these big 2 wins?
Well, you know, I've heard a lot of discussion back and forth on this, like, oh, it's the 2 basement teams of the Big Ten, and there is no denying it. Rutgers and Minnesota are at the bottom of this league, and, you know, I've heard people say, you know, the wins are all good and well. It's good to get back to 2 and 3 in the conference, but at the same time, is this team legitimate? Because, you know, Nebraska opened conference play against 3 really good teams, 2 at home and then 1 in Iowa City. They had a chance to win, I would say all of them in some point in those 3 games. They had a chance to win. They held a lead in all 3 of them and let them all get away. And then they bounced back by blowing out, not just beating, but dismantling 2 teams in the Big Ten Conference. And this was the first time since 1971 Nebraska was able to beat back-to-back conference opponents by 25 or more points. So my answer would be, you know, I wouldn't sell this team to the March Madness tournament yet, but I would say that those 2 back-to-back wins over conference opponents by that much for the first time in 40 years, it means something. And one thing that stuck out to me at the weekly press conference is Tim Miles and Siobhan Shields were both singing praises of all the young players like Ed Morrow, Michael Jacobson, and Glenn Watson, saying these guys, they said before these 2 games that these guys have to learn to lose before they learn to win. And they think, at least Coach Miles thinks, that these young players are getting over the hump of some sorts, and you're kind of seeing that. Ed Morrow's scored double digits the last 2 games. Glenn Watson is looking really natural at that point guard position. So, like I said, I'm not sure if I want this team, or obviously I want them to succeed. I'm not sure if I'm sold on a March Madness bid, because last year around this time Nebraska was 13-7 and 4-1 in the Big Ten, and then all went south. So it's hard to predict what Coach Miles will do, especially in this position when we're only just getting into conference play. But I think these next 3 games or so are going to be huge, because you have a road game against a winnable team, in my mind, a road game against one of the best teams in the country, the best team in the conference, and then you have a really good team coming into your house in the Michigan Wolverines and a chance to pull an upset on national TV. So I think these next 3 games are going to be really interesting, and I think Nebraska has some home games where they can get some people, they have a second chance against Rutgers to get another win. Ohio State looks beatable this year. They come to PBA. Purdue, they lost in Champaign, and they play in Lincoln early March. And then Nebraska has another shot at Indiana Northwestern, both on the road. So these next 3 games going to be a really good measuring stick, I think, to see how this team really does stack up in the Big Ten.
Tommy, long-time listener, first-time caller here. And, so far, you've been announcing games here left and right. Who has been the most impressive player on this Nebraska ball team so far this season?
I mean, I hate to go with the easy answer, but I got to say Andrew White. I mean, he is, he's everything that he was advertised. The junior transfer out of Kansas sat out last year, and he's looked really, really good. Him and Siobhan Shields at those forward positions, he's just been very solid. His slowest game this year is 12, 13 points. I mean, on average, he'll give you about 20. His season average is 17.3 a game, but it seems like almost every night he can get you about 20 points and about 5, 6, 7 rebounds on average. So I'd say that's the best player. And Siobhan Shields, his 100th consecutive start against Minnesota the other night, looked really good. Led the team with 24 points. I'd say he's still been solid. He's always. Someone asked me, do I think Siobhan Shields gets drafted? I really don't think so. But he's just a really nice guy, a really smart guy, and he's always been that second best scorer, but he's a great role player. And that's what he's always been doing. He always played second best to Turan Petaway, and he's playing second best to Andrew White, and I think he's fine with that. And he's really good at that 2 spot, at the second best scoring position.
Now, Tommy, I've been known here to really, really be a hater, quote unquote, of Ty Webster.
Yeah.
I don't think he's a starting caliber player. I don't think he's a 6th man, but he had a good game. You look at the game against Iowa, he had his, or I think his best game of his career. He had 22, 5. He didn't have any assists, but his scoring was really well. But I don't know. My opinion of that is Andrew White really didn't show up that game. He only had 9 points, because I think Iowa's whole focus was slow down Andrew White, slow down Siobhan Shields. What do you think of Ty Webster? Do you think he should be starting? Do you think he should be 6th man, or where do you see him?
Oh, I absolutely think he should start at some point in time. I think starting Glenn Watson and Benny Parker, I think that's fine. But if you wanted to swap out Webster for a game, I think that's fine. I think Webster does well coming off the bench. We've seen it. He did have 6 points against Rutgers, and then he came off the bench also against Minnesota and played pretty well, where he scored 9 points. So I think he's a good him or Glenn Watson can be a good third scoring option. My big problem with last year's team in 14 and 15. The big key to Nebraska's tournament run a couple years ago was Walter Pitchford. He was on average about the 3rd best scorer, but when he was hot, when he was hitting threes and, just on his game, it really brought that team together. It really gave them another dynamic. It really gave them another offensive element, and it made them more dangerous. With this team, I feel like if either Glenn Watson or Ty Webster get hot, shoot well, I think this gives this team a whole nother dynamic. My big thing with Ty Webster, he's not a jump shooter. He is not a jump shooter. He never has been. He's not a great three-point shooter. When he drives to the hoop, though, that's his game. He drives to the hoop and he looks good, and that's what he did against Cincinnati. That's what he did against Iowa. He's been doing it a little bit these last 2 games and wins over Minnesota and Rutgers. If the sooner Ty Webster realizes that driving to the hoop is his game and he stops taking jump balls, then I think he becomes a solid third starter. Now, the fact that, Webster's a senior, Watson's a freshman, I think you just keep starting Watson as a freshman because, like I said, he's looked natural and he's able to score when he's on. But, get Ty Webster off the bench, and, when he comes off the bench, I think he'll give you some solid production. As long as he continues to do that, I think Nebraska continues to show good offensive production numbers like they've been showing.
Do you think that type of third option, that Ty Webster, can be that reliable third scoring option for this team? Or do you think it needs to be someone like Lynn Watson or Ed Morrow? Because a lot of talk has been made all year about Nebraska needing that third option, not only scoring, but on the floor at all times, rebounding, defense, the whole player.
Right. And I don't think it matters where it comes from because, there are days, where Glenn Watson will only give you 2 points, or Ty Webster, we've seen Ty Webster's share of off days. And so if Ed Morrow can, provide the best scoring option at the 5 spot, then so be it. It's going to vary from night to night. Even in that tournament run a couple years ago, sometimes it was Leslie Smith who had the third most points. So I don't think it matters. Wouldn't say it needs to come from a certain area at all times. Just if that's just why all 5 players need to be consistent. I'm not saying all 5 need to shoot lights out every night, but they need to be consistent because there's going to be days where the freshman Watson or the inconsistent Ty Webster aren't going to have a great night. So if they're not on their game, then either Michael Jacobson or Ed Morrow, whatever five spot that Miles wants to go with, that's why that they need to be playing good basketball. That's why they need to at least play well defensively. And so far, I think Ed Morrow and Jacobson are really kind of climbing up the ladder as far as that 5 spot goes, as far as their physical presence goes. So, and as I said, Ed Morrow's been scoring pretty well the last couple of games. Looking at those numbers in that win over Rutgers, let's see, Ed Morrow, I think he had 10 points, and then against Minnesota, Morrow was getting in on the action as well, and he had 9 points in that one. So, like I said, he's not going to score a lot. He's not going to give you a lot every night, but if that can just be a good presence down low and just where if Nebraska could if Morrow and Jacobson could limit guys like an Ochefu or a big center like that, if they run into someone like that, or a Jeff Grossell from Creighton, if they run into someone like that again down the road, Morrow and Jacobson's big role is just to kind of limit them and just give Nebraska somewhat of a defense down by the basket. If they do that, then that's great. Then I think Webster and Watson will provide you that third most amount of points that you need to have a good offense.
And so with the talent Nebraska has right now, do you believe that they have a chance to make a tournament run? Do you believe this team has enough talent to make the tournament in March?
This is a really young roster. I mean, there's 6 new freshmen, a couple of transfers. This is a really young roster. There's a lot of talent here. What Miles has done for the long term, I think, is admirable. It's great. I think in 2 years, this team could be ranked, could be in the top 6 of the Big Ten. It could be like a 3, 4, 5 seed in the tournament, in the Big Ten tournament, that is, and then see it get a solid seeding in the Big Dance, in the March Madness tournament. This year I did not expect them to make the tournament, and I still think that's a bit of a lofty expectation from a team like this. We knew this was going to be a rebuilding year. 14-15 was not supposed to be. 14-15, Nebraska returned 7 of their top 8 starters from that tournament team and just fell apart. And some say it was, Pettaway being a selfish player. Some people say it was just some issues within the locker room. And, obviously Pettaway was going through some personal things with his mom being ill and stuff, which is really unfortunate. But nevertheless, Nebraska took a couple steps back last year when they weren't supposed to. And even if Nebraska was good last year, say in 14-15 Nebraska won 20 games, I still think this year would have been a rebuilding year because Leslie Smith has gone, Walter Pitchford has gone, Teran Pettaway has gone. A lot of your key components from that 13-14 tournament team were going to be leaving regardless. So I think this season was supposed to be a rebuilding year. And, 10-8, that's about where I expected this team to be. I think from what we saw early in those games, obviously a game against Samford at home, no one expected that to be a loss. Nebraska obviously had a chance to beat Cincinnati, a chance to beat Miami, chance to beat Indiana. But, a young team, that's what's going to happen. A lot of those, like Glenn Watson, Ed Morrow, Michael Jacobson, players like that, don't have a lot of experience, and let's be honest, Nebraska doesn't have a reliable center right now. It's either Jacobson or Morrow, but they're freshmen, and they've shown, inconsistency earlier this year. Now, what they've done, Nebraska, these last 2 games, they're trending up, but those were only the, 6-win teams from the bottom of the conference. What I'm really curious to see is, can Nebraska continue this offensive attack against bigger, more physical Big Ten teams, and can Morrow or Jacobson be reliable in that 5 spot against like a Valentine from Michigan State or like a good player from Illinois like I'm drawing Kendrick Nunn or Malcolm Hill, like one of those 2 guys. So that's really what I'm interested to see as they go down the stretch here in Big Ten play.
Okay, so now Tim Miles has been on the hot seat. I feel like this year, some of it justified, a lot of it unjustified. I think he's playing more toward, like you said, I think he's playing more toward the future, and he's bringing in a lot of talent. And what people don't understand is we got a very good recruit in Isaiah Roby coming in next year. I think he's very underrated. He's a 3-star, 78 on ESPN in terms of grading. But it's all the potential in the world. I think Miles has proven to know a system and know how to develop people. But do you think he should be on the hot seat this year, or what do you think? I think he should be one more year, but I kind of want to get your take on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've heard a lot of discussion on this team and about whether or not Miles should stay or go. I don't think he's on the hot seat. I think people don't understand how hard it is to be consistently like at the top in this Big Ten conference. I do believe the Big Ten is the best conference in college basketball. And it's hard to consistently go to the tournament year after year after year at a school that's been historically known for football and a school that's never really had much basketball history. Nebraska is 0-7 all time in the Big Dance. So I think that, 13 and 14, that team was not supposed to be that far. They were picked to finish like 13th in the Big Ten that year. They overachieved. They inspired some hope in Lincoln and in Husker Nation. And I think, unfortunately, what that did, I think there's a fairly large sector of fans. I'm not saying the majority, but there's a large number of fans out there that didn't follow Nebraska ball that closely until they caught fire, until they caught traction 2 years ago. And I think that set some unrealistically high expectations. Now, 14 and 15, I'm still like a little confused why it went the way it did, with a 9-game losing streak, with a guy like Petaway, with 7 of those top 8 players coming back. As I said, that was unexpected, but I think it was, because Walt Pitchford, we heard things that, his game just regressed. We don't really know why. And again, Petaway was going through some personal things. I think there was just some inner chemistry problems with that team that led it, down the wrong path going down the stretch last year. And I think those fans that only had been paying attention for about a year are like, oh, what the heck is this? They had like all these really lofty, unrealistic expectations for Nebraska. And I don't think some people took the time to say, took the time to look at this roster and say, you know what, there's a lot of youth. It's going to be a little while till they get back to that tournament spot. So, the fact that people are calling for Miles' head is absurd, considering the recruiting class he brought in this year was like one of the highest in Husker Hoops history.
I've looked at it for a while. This team misses Craig Smith as an assistant coach. Miles has made some poor games coaching, or poor decisions coaching in game. I think that's why people are concerned. Nobody's concerned with the recruiting. He's obviously been magnificent his whole time here, getting better players than Nebraska's really ever had. But I think the concern is losing to teams like Incarnate Word last year, Samford this year. Do you think Nebraska needs a new assistant coach to really be in Miles' ear, or what do you think needs to happen for Nebraska to avoid those types of losses in the future?
They did just replace Chris Harriman, so I think I don't really have any problems with the assistants on the current team. I haven't heard anything negative about it. So as long as those assistants are doing their job and players are producing, which recently we've kind of seen that Nebraska's played well defensively, I feel like, in the Big Ten since Miles has been here. And, people have done nothing but speak highly of assistants like Harriman. So I don't think that's the problem, unless players or Coach Miles himself notices that, hey, you know what, this assistant, his plan, his his playbook, his way of coaching is bringing us down, is not allowing us to reach our goal, our potential, then okay, let him go. But I haven't really heard any talk about that among players, media, staff, anything like that. So, I mean, as long as they're doing their job and players are happy, I say just let them work as long as they want to work.
I got one more for you. What do you think is the ideal starting lineup for this obviously undersized Nebraska ball team?
Oh, that's a really good question. I like the lineup they've gone with these last couple of games. I think Siobhan and Andrew White, the forward and the guard, are obviously really good in that spot. But the only question I would put is Benny Parker. Benny is a great kid. I think everyone loves him. Everyone loves his energy. I think he's a verbal leader. He is a senior. Had a great game against Northwestern with those 5 3 balls. But that's the thing. You're not going to get 17 points a night from Benny Parker. And I think Glenn Watson is, just more naturally gifted as a point guard. And I think I think a lot of people wanted Watson to start like right out of the gate early this year, and it wasn't happening until about that Miami game, right in that area of the season. So I think starting Glenn is great. White and Shields, I think Jacobson or Morrow, I'm fine with either one of them because, they're both still young. They're both kind of feeling out that 5 position and seeing if they like it. And they both shown flashes of potential to me. So either Jacobson or Morrow. And then, as far as Benny Parker, I think maybe Jack McVeigh. Start McVeigh or Webster in place of Parker. I'd say maybe rotate those 3 a little bit because McVeigh's a freshman. He needs to get some experience, and he has the potential to be a good shooter. You've seen a couple of games where he's been able to knock down some threes. Ty Webster, he's one of the seniors on this team, and like we've seen against Cincinnati, against Iowa, a few other games in the past, when he drives to the hoop, when he is aggressive, Nebraska's a different team. So I would say maybe alternate between Parker, Webster, and McVeigh. I think since McVeigh is younger, maybe put him in as that 6th or 7th guy. Bring him in off the bench. He doesn't need to be starting yet because he hasn't set the world on fire yet. But I'd say maybe start Webster, and if Webster struggles, bring in Parker. And if Parker's maybe struggling, bring in Jack McVeigh a little earlier. Give McVeigh some more minutes. So I'd say that third guard spot is really my only question at this point. Otherwise, Shields, White are the leaders of this team. Jacobson or Morrow look better, are trending up in that 5 spot. And for Parker at point guard, he is the senior. He deserves some minutes. He's a hard worker. He's a good defensive player. But if you're looking for some points, I'd say Webster and McVeigh are good options to go to if Parker isn't producing.
Every possession Morrow has played this season has been at the 5. Do you think he's worth a look at the 4, or do you think we need only one big on the floor at a time?
Oh, boy, that's another good question. A lot of people have been saying that this team lacks size overall. Excuse me. I think maybe, you do consider him for a 4. I think, Jacobson is a little bit bigger than what Morrow is, and, maybe you could make the argument Jacobson's a little bit more physical at the 5 spot. So I think consider it, but whatever Ed Morrow's most comfortable with, if he seems to be producing the most at the 5 spot, leave him there. If McVeigh would be a better option at the 4 spot, try that. But I don't know. I think, like I said, I like Watson and Parker. They both give good things at the guard spot. White and Shields obviously are your best players. And then, like I said, Jacobson and Morrow are about at the same level right now. So if Morrow's comfortable where he's at, leave him there. And if Jacobson proves to be a more physical presence at that 5 spot, then sure, try Morrow out. They're young players. I think this Miles and this staff are still kind of trying to figure out, what these players' strengths are and how they gel with this team. So, I'm certainly open to that if that's what gives Nebraska more success. But right now, what Ed Morrow is doing, like you said, what we've seen in the games that he's been productive, these last 2 games where he's put up 9 and 10 points respectively, he's been playing that 5 spot. That's where his minutes have come from, kind of alternating with Jacobson. So if that's what Miles wants to do, that gives Nebraska the best chance to win this year, I say go for it.
Well, let's see if Nebraska ball can continue this stretch that they have the last 2 games. They play at Illinois tomorrow in Urbana-Champaign. Well, thanks so much, Tommy. We appreciate the time. When we come back, college basketball writer Matt Hardesty joins us with some choice words for the Wisconsin high school athletic officials. Stay with us. This is the Spill Sports Show.
Woo! bring 'em out, bring 'em out, bring 'em out, bring 'em out. It's hard to yell when the barrel's in your mouth. Come on.
You're listening to the Spill Sports Show on KRNU2.
Just gotta do what I gotta do, and when I gotta do it, So basically, just doing what I gotta do every time I step on the court and do what I gotta do.
Now, live from Andersen Hall on the UNL campus, here's Matt Reynoldson, David Eickholt, and Scott Ayers.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Spill Sports Show on KRNU2. College basketball writer Matt Hardesty joins us now. Good to have you in here again, Matt.
How's it going, guys? It's good to be back. Thanks for having me back on. Always a pleasure to be here.
Now, you're a little outraged about what's going on in Wisconsin. I know the basis of the story, but you have more on that for us and why the Wisconsin high school athletic officials hate sports and America.
They do hate America. They literally hate America. Honest to God. So a little background story about myself. Like Scott over there is a Denver, Colorado boy, Timmy Tebow. I am a Wisconsin boy. And so I grew up, spent my whole life in Wisconsin, was very involved in high school athletics, went to all the games, football, basketball. And we've gotten our fair share of trouble. So I was a little alarmed when I came back here and I read in Sports Illustrated, of all places, that the usually incompetent Wisconsin Interscholastic Athletic Association, or whatever they're called, WIAA, decided to send out a suggestion to all state high schools to curb any offensive or demeaning chants to opponents. And we're not talking about, there are some pretty vulgar things I've heard, in Indiana, it's well known that their students booed Tom Crean's son and was like, fire your dad. Or they chanted, Tom Crean sucks at his game. It's nothing bad like that. They're saying you can't chant airball, or overrated, or not even you can't do that. That's just stupid. That's the only way to put it. It's incompetent. And then they made matters worse by sending out another thing saying, try to stay away from chanting USA. USA. You know why? Not because they hate America.
Yes, because they hate America.
But also because they think that USA stands for you suck and then fill in the blank. And I've never heard that. And coming from someone who, when he was the leader of his student section in high school, planned a patriotic game almost every other week, I'm kind of outraged because, at any point in the game when things are kind of dead, a USA chant gets everyone back into the game. So, and this isn't the first time the WIA has done stupid stuff. I've been mad they cut the state tournament there from 8 teams to 4 teams because they are cheap and, yeah, I can't say the rest of my words to describe them because they're not allowed on the radio. They moved the women's tournament to Green Bay because they hate women. And you may think Green Bay sounds nice from all the Sunday night football things, but no, it is a wasteland of absolute nothing but Lambeau Field. They ruled a hockey player. This is another reason they hate America. They ruled a high school hockey player, one of the best in the nation, ineligible for the state tournament this year because he played for the American hockey national team, like the U19 or whatever. Finally,
which is technically amateur.
Yeah, it's amateur. He did not receive any benefits or anything. Finally, they came to their senses on that. But it's just all these examples. And it's getting a lot of national attention. Jay Billis went on quite the rant the other day saying that students should just dress like nuns, and then offered a bunch of other good examples of appropriate chants. The Wisconsin students, as they should, are speaking out. A couple student sections already have shown up to their games with duct tape over all their mouths. It's 2016. I understand can't do anything offensive. It's not like they're shouting homophobic slurs or racial slurs because they're not. Even in my hometown, we've had a few issues, but they never gathered attention like this. But I think another angle of this that absolutely no one's talking about is the fact a lot of people are Scott Van Pelt went on a huge rant last night on his excellent show. he went on a huge rant last night talking about how this starts at a young age when you got teams playing and not keeping score because they don't want to hurt the losers. Well, I mean, you're losers. Deal with it, grow up, quit the sport if you're bad at it. If you want to get better, practice, work harder. It's as simple as that. But I think another way, I think you should look at the next level, because at the center of Wisconsin, we have a university. It's not very well liked out here. The University of Wisconsin-Madison is by far one of the most vulgar schools in the country.
Yeah.
I mean, the students literally, once a game, run a chant that is eat excrement and then bleep you. Like, one half goes the eat part, the other half goes that part. And they have done this since before I was born. Like, that's just a normal thing. And they have tried for years to stop this. Like, even Barry Alvarez a few years ago offered free tickets for the entire all of their students to go to their bowl game. And by the way, this was the year they had Russell Wilson. So he literally offered their students a free trip to Pasadena for the Rose Bowl if they would just not chant this. And while they played that announcement over the loudspeakers, guess what they chanted? So I mean, I think part of this might be they want to maybe clean stuff up before.
Quell the culture?
Yeah. Change it. And I disagree with that. That's just kind of Wisconsin. They get upset. They complain about things. They complain about officiating. When things go their way, they swear. They put down their opponents. That's just Wisconsin culture.
There's a difference, I believe, as far as this goes. I believe there's a difference between being demeaning and being hurtful towards high school students who are in their formative years and having something be part of sports. This is something, chanting air ball, chanting scoreboard, getting the students into it that aren't on the court. It's building the high school experience. It's building the camaraderie there. And them trying to take that away, no, in the grand scheme of things, it's not a huge deal, but it's on the path to being a big deal. It's on the path to where we're going as a country as far as sports. Because I try and stray away from political stuff a lot of the time. But as a country dealing with sports, there is an increased movement toward the participation trophy era.
Boo.
Exactly. Boo. And you can't do that at Wisconsin high school athletic games anymore.
Another part of this that people don't realize is that when you talk or when you chant things like airball or you can't do it, these athletes love it. They eat it up. They love when they're the center of attention. Like, a lot of times we would do special chants at, the walk-ons when they would get it for the opponents, when they get in at the end of the game. Because, I mean, they never get to play. Or not the walk-ons, I'm stuck in the college.
Bench warmers?
Yeah, the bench warmers. Because, they want some attention, too. I mean, and when you can't chant stuff at the opponents, it's that fuels them half the time. Like, when you chant air ball.
Yeah. Exactly.
If you can't hit the rim, you deserve
the chant. Exactly.
Don't shoot.
It goes back to my rant about them trying to do the Shaq technique of fouling. Two things: make your free throws, and if you don't want the airball chant at you, don't airball it.
Yeah,
it's that simple.
Exactly.
But
let's switch gears a little bit to college basketball. You're a college basketball writer, and so you have expertise. And we have the thirst for knowledge. Ooh. So let's start off with this. Taking a little different direction here from we've watched college basketball all season, but about the games that aren't really on TV, which team do you think is the best mid-major in the country?
Well, Matt, I went home after a grueling first semester, and I spent while you guys watched those 30-point ugly blowouts, I spent nearly my entire break sitting on my couch watching almost every basketball game you could possibly watch.
So a productive Christmas break.
Oh, it was very productive. I spent it 4 days straight between New Year's weekend just on my couch watching basketball. And I've come back a lot more educated, I guess. So if you want a team in your mid-majors to keep an eye on, the one that I've sort of been watching lately, Chattanooga. No one's really talking about them, but they had a very strong non-conference season. They had a nice overtime win over Georgia to start their year. They won at Illinois, which isn't that hard to do. That's why I found it was funny when your last guest was struggling to come up with someone good on Illinois for Nebraska to stop.
Well, there's not really that many good people on Illinois.
There's about two.
Kendrick Nunn and Malcolm Hill, then everyone.
Malcolm Hill's a stud, but other than that, yeah. And then the one that really got Chattanooga on my attention is they went into Dayton, who is another mid-major that is just outstanding year after year, and they dominated them. Like, they shut them down, and they got a nice win. They're 4-1 in SoCon play. I think they're definitely – it's a tough conference there, and there's a lot of good teams. Our old pals Mercer, you remember them from a couple midsummer marches ago.
Yeah.
Don't do that to me, Matt. That was painful.
I'm going to do it to you.
Even though I picked Mercer in that game, but still, yep.
So, I mean, they're not a lock for the tournament, but they did beat Mercer by 12 a couple weeks ago. But I still think they got guards. They play a tough defense. A couple good bigs. They're your typical mid-major team. Lots of experience. I think they could maybe, if they get like a 13 or even a 14 seed in the tournament and they get the right matchup, don't be surprised if they're our new darling this year.
Matt, first-time listener and first-time caller over here. And, you know, we're talking about these mid-major teams, but people want to know who's the best. In your eyes, in your opinion, so far in this young season, who has been the most impressive team to you so far?
I can't give you an honest answer there. You think last year this was a clear cookie-cut answer. There was the undefeated Kentucky. And then
Wildcats.
There was Wisconsin and Duke, who were incredibly good, obviously, because they played for the national championship. And then after that, there was absolutely nothing. This year, there's about by the end of the year, we could have at least 8 or 9 teams be number one in the nation. Like, the minute a team looks good, like you saw Kansas a couple weeks ago, they hung up 109 on the number 2 team, Oklahoma, in one of the best games in recent years.
Yep.
And just this week, they got dominated by
West Virginia.
Michigan State, they were number 1 for a good chunk of the season until Denzel Valentine got hurt. They lose one without Valentine, and then he comes back, and they lose by even more to the same team. I mean, Iowa is looking really good right now. I don't think they're top team in the country status, but I mean, no one's playing better than them. But I'm still sticking. I would not be surprised to see at the end of the year Kentucky, Oklahoma, maybe Kansas if they can ever figure out how to win in March. Like, this year's honestly going to come down to who gets the best path to the championship in the Final Four. If you get the easiest opponents, you're going to win. If you have to face some tough mid-majors or they stack a bracket against you like they did to poor Wichita State 2 years ago.
Yeah, no kidding.
It's going to be a rough March. It's as simple as that.
Now, Matt, let me ask you, what I've been looking at is I'm really intrigued by the SEC because I don't think there's a really clear-cut best team in the SEC right now.
Not at all.
But if you look at the standings, I mean, the big surprise for me right now is Texas A&M. I mean, they're 4-0. They're 14-2 overall. What do you think about the SEC in general right now? Are you surprised?
Yeah, I'm very surprised. It's kind of like where the Pac-12 was last year, where they had a lot of good coaches, but they're still getting their systems in play. And so the results weren't showing, but the potential for good years to come. And now look at this year. We could have like 7 or 8 teams from the Pac-12 make the tournament just because they're all going crazy out there. I agree. I said before the year Texas A&M was one of the schools to watch in the nation that no one was talking about. They recruit the state of Texas very well. And like most big states, Texas has a lot of good basketball players. They had a couple rough stretches in December. They lost a couple close games and got blown out. Lost a rough one to Syracuse down in the Bahamas. But you can't complain when you're in the Bahamas, win or lose.
Yeah, exactly.
They got some good guards. Alex Caruso is a great big man. I don't know if they're going to win the SEC. Billy Kennedy, he's been there a long time, kind of underachieved, lots of NIT appearances for them. As for the rest of the SEC, Frank Martin, that's where they're going to end up anyways.
Yeah.
Frank Martin's done an outstanding job building up South Carolina. He's recruiting very well. down there, and they just took their first L of the season 2 nights ago to Alabama, who's also got a first-year coach, Avery Johnson. I like him.
It wasn't just an L. They got massacred.
They didn't score for the first 8 minutes of the second half. It was bad. Ole Miss has one of the most explosive scorers in the conference, and Stephon Moody. Look the dude up. If Lil Wayne dyed the tips of his hair red, it would be Stephon Moody. It's a doppelganger. It's the only way to put it.
He had 33 the other night too.
Yeah, he did against a good defensive team in LSU. Vanderbilt, they're finally getting back to the way they are. They were expected. They're good shooters. Riley LeChance, great guard. But, I mean, you can't talk SEC without talking the 2 best teams in the conference, LSU and Kentucky. LSU, I've been a critic of them like all season because I'm not nobody's really a Johnny Jones fan, their head coach. But they have a lot of talent. Number one, he's going to be the number 1 overall pick in the draft, Ben Simmons.
Undisputed.
He's a just box score machine. He fills it all up. I mean, he can score 30 any night. He can grab 15 rebounds, 15 assists. Not all at once, but, I mean, that's what he's capable of. He's made for the NBA. He's already got the body. But what's made that team really good is since Arizona transfer Craig Victor became eligible to play, that team has only lost, I think, 2 games to Wake Forest in Florida. They dominated Kentucky at home 2 weeks ago. Like, the game was barely close. They got some other good guys. Lots of length on that team. They're a nightmare to play, but who knows? I mean, when you blow as many games as Johnny Jones teams do, can't trust them.
So, real quick, SEC champion, national champion. I know it's early, but at this point, SEC champion and national champion.
Oh, man. You're asking me to pick a champion out of a conference that is kind of a garbage.
We'll have you back before the end of the season. So
I mean, it's hard to go against Kentucky right now just because the only team that's really won an SEC championship while Calipari's been at Kentucky that's not Kentucky is Florida, and they're still kind of getting back their mojo. So I'm still going with Kentucky. I think they only lose about 3 or 4 more games, and I think everyone in the SEC is going to lose quite a few games to each other. As for a national champion, it's like I said, that's impossible to pick. I mean, I think obviously Kentucky's going to be there. Calipari, he's a wizard in March. There's no other way of putting it. I really like Oklahoma. They got Buddy Hield, Player of the Year candidate. He can score in bunches. They got Ryan Spangler. When he's healthy again, he's been playing through a knee injury, which is really hard to do for the last few weeks. If he gets back to 100%, he's a big man that can get to the hoop, grab rebounds, and can shoot threes. Kind of lots of Frank Kaminsky in him, only more tattoos and less marijuana. I think Oklahoma, if they get the right bracket and can get over that hump, is good. And then obviously Michigan State. I mean, Izzo in March, you can't go against him either.
As long as they don't run into Iowa.
We'll see. Iowa, they got to avoid another loss to a 14 seed this year.
Well, there you have it, folks. Thanks so much for joining us, Matt. Hope to have you back soon.
Thanks for
Coming
having
up
me on.
next, the $1.3 billion jackpot, $1.5 billion jackpot has been claimed, but that doesn't stop us from dreaming. Up next is the Pop Culture Spill. We'll talk about the best things we do with the money. Stay with us. This is the Spill Sports Show.
The Spill Sports Show. Matt Reynoldson.
I've always been told I have the face for radio, and now I'm making it happen.
David Eickholt.
It's utter blasphemy. It blows my mind.
Scott Ayers.
The next time they make the playoffs, I'll be running for president.
Kick off your weekend with hard-hitting sports talk every Friday afternoon from 1 to 3 on KRNU2.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Spill Sports Show. This is our weekly non-sports segment, the Pop Culture Spill, and today we're talking money. What are the best things you would do if you won the $1.5 billion jackpot? I'm really interested to hear what Scotty has to say on this.
Boys, I've been thinking a while, so I'm gonna keep it sports related somewhat. First thing I would do, I'd buy the Los Angeles Rams. I'd move them back to St. Louis. Next purchase, Philadelphia 76ers. Not only would I buy that program, I then would sell it to China. And I would start my own basketball program because, quite frankly, I could start a basketball program that is much superior to anything we're seeing in Philadelphia right now. But honestly, I'd probably buy me some Taco Bells. I'd start some businesses. I would invest. And, guys, I'd give you each $50 gift cards to Target. That way you can buy anything of your choice. I'm a generous man. It's what I do. So, to recap, St. Louis Rams are back in St. Louis. Philadelphia Sixers are now in China. And you both have $50 gift cards to Target.
Yes.
Dude, I'm so pumped.
You know, I would that Philadelphia 76ers, I thought you were going to be running for president when the next time they make the playoffs.
Yeah.
So,
that's, you know.
Well, they won't make the playoffs. They'll be in China.
That's right. They will be in China. David, what would you do with the 1.5 bill?
Well, you know, when this question was first posed to me, the first thing that came to mind is I want to be a billionaire. So freaking bad. Great song. Anyway.
Not a great song.
It's a fantastic song. I'll tell you what. I've really thought a lot about this. If I got the small sum of $1.5 billion, as Donald Trump would say, I would buy the Golden State Warriors. I would move Steph Curry to the 2 guard, and I would bring Russell Westbrook and Kevin Durant to the Golden State Warriors, because that would be the biggest dynasty we'd ever see in sports history. They would never lose. But no, on a real note, I'd probably put $100 million in the bank, because I know me, I'd probably just splurge on a whole bunch of chains or something jewelry related of the sort.
Jeez.
I'll tell you what, I'm a very generous man. I would give you each $51 to Target. Unlike some people who only give $50.
Dude, that's so unoriginal, though.
You're one.
You know what? You can have $49.99.
All right. See, now there we go. There we go. We're playing Price is Right style. You know what? I would not buy a sports team, unlike you two weirdos. I would buy the world's largest box of Cheez-Its. You know, like, whenever I'm sad, whenever I go home, Cheez-Its just get me through the day.
Sponsor.
Oh, yeah, sponsor. Oh, wait, we can't do that, can we? We're on a non-profit radio station.
So it's
Chazot's. Cheese squares. I love cheese squares. Those are awesome.
Chazot's.
But no, for real, I would probably try and overthrow Roger Goodell with the $1.5 billion. Just because, like, I see him on TV shaking hands with all these really rich guys, and I see him with this smug look on his face, and it just grinds my gears. Roger Goodell is just... I don't know if I would have anything against him as a person if I saw him in person. I just really don't like his face.
Roger Goodell's like Iggy Azalea's music. Complete garbage.
Oh, hot take.
No, I 100% agree. Let me say something about Iggy Azalea.
First things first.
John Gruden would say, I'll tell you what, man, this Iggy Azalea girl, she just does not have it in her. When she runs Spider 2Y Banana, it just is a complete and utter failure, man. I just don't think that she's capable for the NFL, and I think Swaggy P needs to move on, man. I'll tell you what, I love this country, man.
I don't know if anything can ever top that. So we're gonna go to break. When we come back, it's the final rundown. Don't miss it. This is the Spill Sports Show. It's the final rundown. Welcome into the final rundown, our final segment here on the Spill Sports Show, where each host has a 30-second rant and the other hosts each get a 30-second rebuttal on each topic. It's crunch time, and things are about to get heated. David, you're on the clock.
All right, so ESPN recently released an article grading the top 10 point guards of all time, and they put 27-year-old Stephen Curry at number 4 overall, above Steve Nash and Isaiah Thomas. Isaiah Thomas scored 25 points in one quarter of the NBA Finals. Steph Curry has arguably the best overall team that this game has ever seen. This is ridiculous. He needs more time. He has very, very big potential to be a top 5 overall. But this is ridiculous. 27 years old. Don't put him above the greats. Respect the legends. Boom.
And you know what? I completely agree. Steph Curry could, in all matters, finish as a top 5 point guard of all time. The problem is he's only 27 years old. His career has barely taken off. He's in mid-flight. He's hitting his top form. But it's what he can do at his top form, and that's what will really prove if he's even worthy of being a top 5 point guard in the NBA. To give him 4th is outrageous. However, I do think he will be a top 10 point guard when his career comes to an end.
Agreed.
You know, this is the least, this is really underrating Steph Curry on ESPN's part, because they've been just nothing but Curry the last year and a half. You know, I really think that this whole Steph Curry thing is being overblown. Yeah, he can hit a shot off the dribble. Yeah, he can pull up and make shots. He's a great shooter. I think he'll probably end up being one of, if not the best shooter of all time. The thing is, there's so much more that goes into being a point guard. Yeah, he can throw a few highlight passes, but are they the passes his team needs at every time? You know, this team struggles more with Draymond Green off the court than Steph Curry off the court, and I think that speaks volumes.
All right, Scott, you're on the clock.
And well, boys, it was January 14th, 2016, and the little engine that could, the Denver Nuggets, took down Goliath and the Golden State Warriors in a 112-110 battle, and this has confirmed my belief that the Denver Nuggets are, quite frankly, the greatest basketball team in the NBA and will win the national title, the NBA title, this season.
You know, I totally agree that you're crazy. No, I think Denver has a long way to go, but, you know, Scotty, I love the bold statements. Always, every single time.
Always. That's what I'm here for.
That's what you're here for. You know, this Golden State team is good. It is the team to beat. And yes, Draymond Green was off the court, but I think this was a win a long time coming for the Nuggets. Really showed the progression of their youth that they have. And I think it's a sign of big things to come, perhaps an NBA title in the next 10 years.
Scotty, I'm not even going to respond to what you just said. I'm just going to go off of what Matt said. Draymond Green. Okay, so I read quick thing. I read an interesting thing the other day, and it said Steph Curry's MVP of the league, but not his own team. How does that make any sense? Draymond Green this season is the MVP of the NBA. I don't think he's the number one case. Steph Curry.
LeBron James
has a case. He has a case. I think it's
Kristaps Porzingis.
Kristaps Goat Zingis.
Goat Zingis.
All right. Matt, you're on the clock.
All right. Every single time I turn on ESPN, one of two things is on the television: Stephen A. Smith or an NFL talk show. If they cut down half of their NFL talk shows, they would just ramp up that audience. Nobody cares that much about the NFL. Yes, it's the number one sport in America. Yes, it's a huge deal as far as money revenue, everything like that. But I don't need to hear 40 guys' different opinions on whether Odell Beckham Jr. being suspended is going to hurt the non-playoff eligible New York Giants. It's just absurd. And when there's controversy about that, that's fine. But when you force controversy like ESPN does with First Take, like they do with so many of their NFL roundtable shows, it's absurd.
And you know what? I completely agree. I try to steer clear of it because I feel like there's about 6 shows in a row where it's just like pro football talk now, football, and you're just like, man, I don't want to watch this right now. And there's so many great sports. I feel like the NHL is one of those sports, maybe the most exciting sport of all sports, and it is very undermined by ESPN. It would just be nice to see a change of pace and things, you know, as the late John Gruden once said, I'll tell you what, man, there's a lot of great sports.
John Gruden?
I'll tell you what, man, there's a lot of great sports out there, but football, it takes first, but I like that hockey too, man.
All right, I'll tell you what. You're exactly right. I think if they cut down just half the programming and they insert, like during college football season, college basketball season, if they insert more just college-oriented shows, I think that would up their ratings a bunch. And the fact, just keep in season. If it's the middle of June and you have 3 hours of NFL insiders, nobody cares. It's the SpongeBob meme. Nobody cares. Just ESPN just has a lot of decisions they need to make, and they need to do some changes if they want to keep their money revenue at where it's at, because they are losing audiences quickly.
And that's all the time we have for today, folks. We'll be back next Friday with more sports talk. Thanks for tuning in. Enjoy your weekend, and go Big Red.
GBR.
The Spill Sports Show. Matt Reynoldson.
I've always been told I have the face for radio, and now I'm making it happen.
David Eickholt.
It's utter blasphemy. It blows my mind.
Scott Ayers.
The next time they make the playoffs, I'll be running for president.
Kick off your weekend with hard-hitting sports talk every Friday afternoon from 1 to 3 on KRNU 2.